Hello and welcome. My name is Jim Rogers and I'm the founder and the senior associate at the Expat Teacher Network. We invite you to visit us at our website, expatteachernetwork.com, where we have a series of videos talking about personal financial advice, amongst other things. Today, our video is very specifically targeted towards those of our colleagues who are teaching in international schools in the country of Germany. Myself and my two colleagues, Anne Bödiger and David Steiner, recently gave a presentation at a school in the Frankfurt area where we all live and work, and we wanted to make the information available both to those people that attended our presentation and perhaps needed further clarification or they've forgotten one of the things that we might have said, and also to allow other colleagues in other schools to see what we have to say. We're titling our presentation today, Your School, Your Union, Your Voice. We're talking very specifically about two things. The Betriebsrat, or Works Council, a unique feature that is quite common and quite prevalent amongst German companies and in German schools, but is virtually unknown in the rest of the world, and unions, specifically the GEW, the Gewerkschaft für Erziehung und Wissenschaft, which is the German teachers union, which many colleagues at my school in Frankfurt belong to. And we want to sort of use the presentation today to make our plug for why we think you should join the GEW and why it's a good idea and what it can add to your professional life and also to the quality of the school that you work at. Well, we're also going to talk about these two different entities, the Betriebsrat, or the Works Council, and the union, and how they work together. As we said, it's a very unique thing that really only exists in Germany. So let's get started and talk about what these two bodies are, how they function, and what their different roles are. So first of all, we want to start with why is there both a BR, a Betriebsrat, or a Works Council, and a union? Well, to put it as simply as we possibly can, in Germany, when a collective bargaining agreement is negotiated, it is negotiated by a union, whether it's at a school or Volkswagen or BMW or Siemens or any company. But unlike other countries where that union and those union representatives would also be responsible for compliance, they would also be responsible for making sure the employer sticks to their end of the bargain. In Germany, the union doesn't do this. It is done by a group called the Betriebsrat, or the Works Council. And they're kind of like the watchdogs or the overseers or the compliance officers of the collective bargaining agreement. It's a very uniquely German thing. It doesn't exist anywhere in the world, at least not that I've ever found, and I've lived on 4 continents. What's also true is that members of the Betriebsrat do not have to be members of the union. At my school, for example, we have multiple members of our Betriebsrat who are not on the union, mainly because, well, in the case of one colleague, she's not a teacher, so she wouldn't be able to join the teachers union. In the case of another colleague, she just chooses not to. She opts for individual as opposed to collective bargaining. So why are both a Betriebsrat and a union important? Why do you need both of these bodies in order to produce a really good quality school? Well, let's start and look at it mainly from the perspective of the Betriebsrat. We'll go on and talk more about the union things later. Without a union, without a negotiated collective bargaining agreement, the compliance that the Works Council is responsible for has a very limited and narrow focus. Basically, if you don't have a collective bargaining agreement, the only thing that the Betriebsrat can force your employer or your school to comply with is labor law. Now, labor law in Germany is pretty pro-labor compared to a lot of other places in the world. Mainly that's because of Germany's history. Also, of course, for those of us that work and live here, it makes for a pretty nice working environment compared to a lot of other places in the world. The downside of it is that labor law is not school specific. Most of the labor laws are made with factory work or with office work in mind and with larger companies in mind, perhaps also smaller companies too, but they're not always school specific. Sometimes they are. And the problem, of course, is without a Works Council, these things can often go unknown and unnoticed. Maybe there are some of you out there working at a school, for example, where you've gone on a class trip with students and you've had to stay overnight with those students away from your own family or away from your own home. And you didn't necessarily want to do it, but you were told by your school that you have to do it. Well, believe it or not, that's illegal. It is illegal under German law for schools to mandate or to force teachers to go on trips where they have to stay overnight with students and away from their own homes. Of course, if people don't know this, the school can do whatever it wants. And this is one of the many benefits that unions and Betriebsrats will give to employees, is it forces basically on the Betriebsrat side, it forces the faculty to have representatives who have to busy themselves with or have to become knowledgeable about German labor law. Mainly without a union as well, on the other side of it. Salaries have no reason to rise. They stay stagnant. A school could simply say, you're making 50,000 euros and that's it. And in order to get a raise, you have to go hat in hand and hope that the school will be generous enough to grant you a raise. Whereas with a union, the collective bargaining agreement lasts for a certain length of time, and the salary tables that are connected to that, last a certain length of time, and they need to be renegotiated. And it's understood that when they're renegotiated, there will be cost of living increases or some sort of salary increase. Well, without a union, the only thing that is left is what we call Betriebsvereinbarung. And a Betriebsvereinbarung is a works agreement, an understanding or a formal agreement between the works council and the administration of a school. The problem is, without a collective bargaining agreement signed by a union or negotiated by a union, these Betriebsvereinbarungen can be canceled at any moment by either side. This happened to our colleagues up at the International School of Hamburg a few years ago, where the school decided to simply cancel all of the works agreements. And the works agreements related to things like, how long a class period is, how many classes is considered a 100% teaching load, what meetings after schools are mandatory and how long are those meetings, how many parent conferences can be held a year, whether or not somebody's required to coach or participate in extracurricular activities or not. All of these things were basically just wiped out. And it's not illegal if there's no union. And of course, if there is a union, well, it's still not illegal, but the union can take action, can bring pressure to bear on the school, and hopefully things like this don't happen. So without a Betriebsrat and a union, without these two important bodies working together, it really doesn't allow the employees to have any protection about things like, for example, meetings and parent conferences. At my school in the Frankfurt area, for example, it's mandated in our collective bargaining agreement. We may only have 4 meetings a month, and 3 of those 4 meetings can last 60 minutes, and the 4th one can last 90 minutes. That's it. Obviously, no teacher likes to be spending a whole lot of times in meetings, but the fact that we're able to limit those and to limit the number of parent conferences, et cetera, allows us as teachers to have as much of our time concentrated on our job, on the 3 basics of our job: lesson planning, marking, and teaching our lessons, as is possible. So let's jump and have a look at some of the very basic reasons why we think joining the GEW and joining the teachers union is a good idea. Well, the first slide here we're titling it Strength in Numbers, and it's probably a pretty obvious concept. The more people that join a union, the stronger that union is. To just talk about some very basics for a moment: how do you get a union into the school? How do you get a Betriebsrat, et cetera, It's very simple. From the union side, enough of the colleagues at your school have to join the GEW. You can join online at gew.de, I believe is the website, and they have an online application form which you can fill out if your German is up to it. If not, then obviously you've got to print the form and have somebody help you with it, and then send it in by fax usually, or post, as they still do snail mail. And then the members of the GEW at that school will elect what's known in German as a Tarifkommission. In English, we would call it a salary negotiating committee, or at least in Canada, where I'm from, that's what we would call it. And that Tarifkommission, there really aren't terribly many hard and fast rules about it. At my school, it's been as large as 5 and as small as 3 people, and it negotiates the collective bargaining agreement, or the Tarifvertrag. And as we said, it's based on a very simple concept. The more members means more strength. And basically, the Tarifkommission is working to ensure 3 things. One, that salaries stay competitive, and by competitive we mean that the buying power and the standard of living of the individual members is protected, and that working conditions remain fair and equitable and conducive to as positive an educational climate as we can, and most importantly, fairness. That your salary should be based on your experience and your qualifications, and your salary should not differ from someone who has identical experience and qualifications simply because that other person happened to be a better individual negotiator than you. At my school, for example, we have a salary grid, a salary table, and each year each individual teacher moves up one step until you get near the top steps, and then people will be stuck at 2 or 3 for 2 or 3 years in one step, and then finally when they hit the top, of course, that takes quite a while at my school. I've been at my school for over 15 years. I'm still not at the top, but when eventually I am, then my salary stays where it is, and the only increases I get are essentially what we call cost of living increases, right? The negotiated salary increases that are pegged mainly but not exclusively to inflation, which of course is rather low in Germany at the moment here as we sit in 2015 in November, which is when this video is made. But inflation, if it goes up, it goes down, and there have been years when our increases have been a little bit more because inflation was a little bit more, and they've been a little bit less because inflation was lower. But without a union, none of that would be possible. So let's look at some of the very, very basic benefits of joining the GEW and of union membership. The first thing, as I said, is fairness. It used to be the case at my school that if you were an American teacher, which we have plenty of, you made approximately 20% less than your British, or in some cases, non-British colleagues. And it was simply because we had different salary scales that had been created by people that had a very prejudicial view of American versus British and Canadian higher education. That has now been stopped. For the last 15 years, we have had one salary grid for everybody. Now, it still slightly disadvantages the American teachers that were here before because they got placed on the new grid, but they didn't get placed equally with the British teachers. But at least the incoming teachers are all placed on one grid, on one salary table where everybody makes the same, again, assuming that qualifications and experience are identical or equal. So that's one of the things that has been of major benefit to the colleagues at my school. The second benefit of membership basically is a voice in the process. If you would like to be able to put your hand up at the meeting and say, hey, wait a minute, I think a such and such percent increase is too extravagant or is too much, we should negotiate more conservatively, you can do so if you're a member of the union. If you're not, of course, you're not invited to the meeting because it's a members meeting, right? You can't go to the membership meeting of a club if you don't belong to the club. And in this case, belonging to the club means you get a say. If you don't belong to the club, you don't have a say. There's also free legal insurance from the GEW for all members. If, God forbid, you are accused of something that requires you to go to court, or if your employer tries to dismiss you unfairly and illegally, the GEW will step in and it will offer you free legal advice and free legal representation. Free legal insurance is available in Germany privately. I myself have private legal insurance because teaching isn't the only way I make my income. However, private legal insurance can be very expensive, and it's not necessarily always better, although it usually, it doesn't mean you can't pick your lawyer, of course, but often the contracts can not necessarily, they don't necessarily cover work-related things, or if they do, they're dealing with people that don't necessarily understand the education system, whereas with the GEW legal insurance, you would be dealing with someone that works for the GEW and so understands not just education but teachers and the advantages and disadvantages that go with the jobs. Next thing to say that's very, very crucial: membership is confidential. I've had over the years many colleagues at my school say, oh, I don't want to join the union because I don't have tenure yet. I'm brand new to the school and I don't want to be seen as a troublemaker, and I'm afraid that if I join, the administration won't offer me tenure. Well, the first thing to say is no administrative member at my school knows who is and who is not in the union. And if they ask me, I'm a member of the Tariff Commission at my school, so my membership obviously is public. If they ask me, I tell them, I'm sorry, that's none of your business. I'm not going to tell you. Membership is completely confidential. It is also illegal in Germany to deny someone tenure or a permanent contract because of membership in a union. And the last benefit or main benefit that we've put up here is it protects your standard of living. A union negotiated collective agreement means that every year you're going to get a percentage increase on your salary that is hopefully commensurate with inflation, excuse me, or even a little bit ahead of inflation, and that allows you to protect your buying power. But believe it or not, if you're a member of the GEW, there are even some other benefits. The first one being union fees are tax deductible. Every month as a GEW member, you get the GEW magazine. And I'll be honest, most of us tend to just chuck it in the bin. However, once a year, on the back cover, there's a perforated edge. You undo the perforated edge, and it gives you a little piece of cardboard paper that you hand to your Steuerberater, your tax accountant, and that becomes one of the deductions that you can claim on your income tax. So essentially, the union fees end up costing you nothing. The other big benefit, I would argue, is that if you need help, you can get it. At my school, we have an early retirement program. We have occasionally, not often, people with benefits about, with questions about salaries and benefits. If they're union members, I'm willing to help them. If they're not, I admit, I'm very blunt about it, and I say, I'm sorry, you're not a member, so good luck. I admit the part of the reason I do that is that unlike my colleagues in the Betriebsrat, I do not get release time and I do not get any stipend or any extra payment for becoming a member of the Tariff Commission. My time is completely volunteer, and this is one of the reasons why I only am willing to help members. For the Betriebsrat, it is very, very different. They serve the entire Betrieb, all employees, and they are obligated to help members of the Works Council, of the Betrieb is called, and they are also very stringently obligated to protect confidentiality, which means that if you go to the Betriebsrat because you have a dispute with the school, not only will they help, they will do their utmost, they must under the law, to protect your confidentiality. And that's one of the big roles that the Betriebsrat plays, in addition to holding Betriebsversammlungen, right, membership meetings or workers' meetings, where people can voice concerns and express thoughts and concerns about how the school is running. Yes, these things can get a little heated if things are not going terribly well at a school. Most of the time, I find recently at my school, they're very healthy. It gives people an outlet. It allows the head of school to hear people's concerns in a very direct way. And then if he feels that they're serious concerns, he can go away. It's a he at my school. He can go away and act on them. Otherwise, it's difficult to have that vehicle. And the nice thing is a Betriebsversammlung is only a works council meeting, which means the principals are not there. And that provides an atmosphere of security and confidentiality that you would not otherwise get. So our last benefit of union membership, you might think it's a typo. It's not, I promise. Inside our unions, the GEW's magazines, there are often, believe it or not, a lot of really good offers on reduced prices for group package vacations. They do also have other things like institutes you can go to if you feel you're suffering from burnout. So they do have things that are professionally very, very helpful. But I've had colleagues over the years use some of those vacations, and they say they get great deals. I admit I don't use them myself, but still, it's there. It's there for the benefit of anybody who's a member. So basically what we're talking about here between the Betriebsrat and the union is a working partnership. And we do work together. The Betriebsrat will come to the union at my school and say, hey, we've noticed that something's come up that's caused a bit of a conflict between a colleague and the school because the wording of a particular benefit in the collective agreement is rather unclear. It can be interpreted this way or that way. And so we would really, suggest that next time you go negotiate that you talk about that and try to clarify it. And we do. We take that on board. And so that they do work together, the Betriebsrat and the union, but they are not the same body. It's not the same group of people. Yes, there can be overlap. At my school, many members of the Betriebsrat are also union members. But in a sense, that's really just coincidental. It's not because they're required to be. It's simply because those people that care about a fair working environment, well, they tend to find both unions and Betriebsrats to be important, and they want to help their colleagues and perform their little tiny bit of public service. The other thing to say is, in spite of what some people really believe, not everybody who's involved in unions and Betriebsrat is a socialist or a communist. I myself am definitely not. The last time I belonged to a political party way back when, it was called conservative. Now, granted, it wasn't the American Republican Party, but it was still called a conservative party. And so I'm not a socialist and I'm not a communist. I'm very much a capitalist. I love profit. But I do also believe very, very passionately in the right to collective bargaining and in everyone's right to be treated fairly in the workplace. And that's why I'm a member of the Tarifkommission at my school, and why I work closely with the Betriebsrat, and why I encourage you to get a Betriebsrat elected and started. The Betriebsrat members are elected by all employees. The Tariff Commission is elected by union members. It requires a little bit of organization, but it's not really that difficult. And then once you have these bodies set up, if you when you go to negotiate and interact with the school, they can't say no. These bodies are allowed by law, and you have a right to them by law. And it's certainly, at my school, has ensured a quality school, a very high quality school and working environment for not just teachers, but also administrators, and mostly the people that are most important to us as educators, our kids, our students. So thanks for listening. And hopefully we've got some good information sent your way. Hopefully you can send it to other people who might be able to make some use of it. We also hope that you're able to join us here at the Expat Teacher Network. You just simply need to send us your name and email address, and that gives you the right to participate in our blogs and to get our information. We're working on a job search guide that should be coming out hopefully very soon. And we thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to email us at info@expatteachernetwork.com, and we'll do our best to answer them, or to put you in touch with somebody who can answer them. And so, yeah, well, happy unioning.